Amazing. Hello everybody. This is happy almost second birthday Gleam. First ever Gleam conference. This is absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for coming. Who am I? I don't really need to explain it. It turns out you all know who I am. I'm the British guy that leads Gleam.
So little British guy.
And before we continue, I just want to say thank you so much to Peter and Laura for running the first ever Gleam Basic. I didn't really believe we could do this, but Peter told me that we could, and he was right again. So always trust Peter. He's normally the pioneer of anything Gleam. So let's get on with the talk. About 2 years ago, just under 2 years ago, I went to the lovely FOSDEM conference, open source conference in Brussels, and asked the question, when is Gleam version 1 going to be, at the end of my talk? And they said, now, we're ready, let's do it. And then that was the point where we pressed the button and everything started. And I marked the occasion by taking a selfie with an audience in the background. So I'd really like to do the same thing again now. So, hello everybody. Hey, thank you very much. Another milestone, brilliant. So it's been 2 years since then, and I don't know about you, but when I'm writing my Gleam code, as I do every day, it's very easy to forget all the things that have changed over the last 2 years. It has been quite a long time since V1, and we've done an unusually large amount of stuff, I think. So I just want to have a little reminder and go through some of those things. And if you're new to Gleam, welcome. You can see what we've done. Be excited for the next few years as well. So we have a bunch of language features. We've always had letter certs, I think, but we now can put a message on it. Very handy. We've got echo, so you can do your debug printing stuff. That's probably my favourite feature. I really like it. I wasn't sure about the name at first, but it's working for me now. We've got assertions, which just normal Boolean assertions, which are really handy for testing, replacing the assertion functions we used to have, which is a feature that has a whole bunch of extra stuff that no one's really tapped into yet. So even though we're not going to change how that works, I think the tooling around it is going to enable much better testing stuff in future. We've got the deprecated attribute, we've got internal, you can control the shape of your public APIs a little bit more, and one that's quite new that I don't see many people adopt yet, but you should. Sorry I put it so low. Putting an external annotation on types. So now you can integrate into the type systems of the two respective host languages much more easily. So that's the language. What else have we done? Well, the core team's got a bunch of core libraries, and they've all been stabilized, except for static library. That's not stabilized. It sort of has, but not formally. We've got everything ready. We think we've made all the changes we need to make, and the only thing we need to do is press the button to release the version 1. But we're just holding off and giving a little time to cool down and get people to migrate over before we commit to it. This one's new. Gleam time came out after version 1. All the others are really quite ancient in Gleam terms. Gleam time I'm particularly proud of because time is one of those things where it's very easy to make a mess in a lot of languages. It turns out it's way more complicated than we all want it to be. And with the design of Gleam time, I think we've made an API that largely makes those errors impossible, which is fantastic. Drawing on a lot of inspiration from other languages that have come before, like Elm was a big one, and Rust, and so on and so forth. If you're interested in how we've done that, I'd say read the docs. It's probably got the best docs of all of these ones. The JavaScript one being the worst, and we keep complaining about the OTP one. So maybe don't worry about those too much, but the Gleam time is really fantastic. And also the ideas in there, you could take to your Ruby programming or whatever, so do have a look at that. We've made a bunch of project and package related improvements. We've got Gleam Dev, so you can there's now a place to put your code generators, profilers, benchmarking, whatever other stuff you might want that isn't part of your application, but isn't part of your tests as well. We've greatly improved the performance of the compiler, particularly with the persistent build server. So if you've got loads of little dependencies, that clean build is going to be much faster. We've got clickable type names in the HTML documentation. Do you remember what it was like before that? Oh my gosh. This function returns a wibble. What's a wibble? I don't know, work it out. But now you can just click it on and you can go there. And then integration with documentation systems, and one that I suspect all of these excellent coders in this room haven't stumbled across, but we now do a bunch of production readiness checks when you try and publish something to Hex. So we go, oh, you look like you're just squatting the name. This looks like it isn't a real project. Or like, oh, you've accidentally left a bunch of debugging code in here. Maybe you want to rethink that before you publish it? So that's part of this push to make Hex a place where you find production-ready, reliable code. It's not a code-sharing platform. You can push things to GitHub or Codebug or whatever you want and pull it from there instead. And on the subject of depth, we've got new commands for introspecting your dependencies, understanding how things have been included, what needs to be updated, actually updating specific things, management, and tying into what I was just saying about making sure Hex is as, I should have been high, shouldn't I? It says, it's shown as a Git dependency. You can now add Git dependency, so when someone says, how do I use my prototype experimental library in our application? You say, well, that is a Git dependency. That will solve your problem for you. You don't have to burden everybody else with something that may not work and they end up having a bad time with it. And the big one, these two folks in the front, the language server. Who remembers language server at version 1.0? Oh, I'm sorry. It sort of exists, and that's sort of all the good things we can say about it. It might show you errors sometimes, and they might occasionally be correct, but largely it just bugged out. And now we've got a language server which, is up there with some of the top tier ones. I'm so impressed with how the team has done with this. And everything on the right side are code actions. I bet you didn't know there was quite so many code actions, eh? If you go to you should learn how to use code actions. If you go onto the website in the documentation site and then you search for language server, there's a reference page that details all the different code actions and what they can do and so forth. So I'd recommend having a look at that occasionally, because I bet there's at least one thing in there which you will start using on a regular basis, if you know it exists. So that's loads of stuff. Gosh, we've made loads of things. Gleam has changed quite a lot, but was there any point to it? What actually came from that at the end? How has that shaped the community and the ecosystem and everything like that? Let's look at some data. I love data. So here's my favourite chart and the one I paid the most attention to, the standard library download rates. It's not the number of downloads, it's the rate. So how many has been downloaded this period of time. It's called recent in Hex. They haven't said how big a window that is, but I assume it's a couple of weeks or something. And it's, if it's going higher, that means there's more people using Gleam at this time. And this is my best metric I've got for actual usage, because we don't have telemetry inside the build tool, inside anything like that. I don't know if you're using Gleam. The only thing I can tell is if you're making noise with the internet, but also how often the standard library is being downloaded. This is also after caching, because there is a layer of caching in the Hex repository at the CDN level. There's also another layer of caching at the Gleam level. We won't download the same package twice onto a computer. It goes into a global store, which also means it can work offline a little bit. So I'm sort of higher. I haven't included numbers, so that doesn't really matter. But this is great because it shows that over time it's been increasing. And in the last year, which is about this last square here, it's been particularly great, which is really what we want to see. Because Gleam is a language for doing things. It's not just a curiosity. We want people to use it to make their lives easier, to enjoy their job more, to make things less stressful, so on. Another proxy for usage is the published package count. Sorry, the software I used to make this was rubbish, so this line is very faint, but I hope you can see it. If you can't see it, it goes up. So more people are engaged enough with Gleam to feel, I want to give something back, I want to make things, and it's growing continually over time. Even with me adding things that tell you, no, this isn't good enough, you can't publish this. So fantastic. And it's been downloaded loads. Even after all that caching, the Gleam standard library has been downloaded just over 1 million times as of a couple of days ago, which I think is amazing. That's so many projects, runs, whatever the actual metric is here. They're super cool, really, really cool. I want to see people using this. That's the point of all of it. So what other metrics are there that we can look at to try and get an understanding of how things are going. Money, sadly, is one of those things. We do actually need to pay bills. I work full-time on Gleam, and so does Jack. And unfortunately, we do need to pay bills. And we don't have a commercial owner or like a direct sort of benefactor sort of situation, unlike pretty much every other major language out there. We're in a really unusual place in that we are not from a company or from an institution. This is an open source community project in the purest sort of way. So we rely entirely on the generosity of sponsors to keep the whole thing running. So how has that been going? That's really important. And I'd just like to take this moment to say a big special thanks to our number one sponsor, our largest sponsor, Lambda Class. They're really a fantastic bunch of people who've been very supportive, and over the last couple of years have enabled a lot of new things. So go check them out if you're interested in games and crypto and infrastructure and all sorts of stuff. But anyway, the data. Sponsor counts. This is really important. So V1 is where this big spike is. That's when everybody was talking about us. We were the new hot thing. Lots of shouty people on YouTube who included Gleam in some of their videos. People really like that. There's one here. And over the 2 years, we've had this really lovely growth. You'll notice in the last year, we've just sort of leveled off, where it isn't really growing, it isn't really shrinking. We get about the same uptake as we're getting people drop out. So the churn's about stable. That's nice. It's really great we've had this long-term growth. It's really nice that we have sort of like stabilized at this level, but it's not as good as we want it to be. If we were talking about an open source project that had a commercial backing, they would have significantly more money behind it than we do at the moment. So we do still want to improve this. This is definitely an area we want to do better. We're able to support me full-time, but not to the level I would get if I was doing this sort of role in pretty much anywhere else. And I really think we should be at the point where we could support the other members of the core team as well. I think that would really pay huge dividends to the community. So that is still our goal. But there was a lot of people there, and here's not all of them. There's another row that I couldn't quite fit on, but because of these wonderful people, we have been able to do this. So thank you so much to everyone who is sponsoring. So give yourself a pat on the back if you're one of them. You spotted yourself? So what else can we look at? Well, the Gleam Developer Survey. We've just done a big survey of all of the community, which asked a bunch of questions, and every time when I do the analysis I realise there's questions I wish I'd also asked, but okay, next year I'll improve it more. The thing I can say about this is that 95% of the feedback was overwhelmingly positive, which is absolutely brilliant. It shows that people are really engaged and love Gleam, and it's going fantastically in that way. 65% of people said the simplicity, that's their favourite thing. That was the most common piece of positive feedback. And then just below that there's the type system, people like static typing and ADTs and all the things that we've heard quite a lot about already. And then other fancy functional programming stuff a little bit behind that. The use syntax got quite a few positive mentions, that's good. People really like that once they've got over that initial hump. And then number 1, 2, 3, 4 was the community. I think that should be the top. I'm surprised that wasn't the main thing everybody was talking about, because that is definitely my favourite thing. The fact it is inclusive and helpful. I've written zero tolerance, attitude of bigotry, but we've already said no Nazi, so yeah, you know what that means. That is fantastic. And then the language server, so all the stuff that's come in the last 2 years or so. Absolutely fantastic. I'm very happy about that. One thing that really jumped out at me when I was looking at it was the amount of people who are using it in production has gone up to 22%, which is brilliant. That's a huge growth from last time we did this. If I was smart, I would have put the actual number on the slide, but I didn't. So we are doing much better. But again, like the financial situation, this is really good, especially for where we are and how young we are, but I want to go much further than this. I want to see far more people using Gleam in production, and I'll come back to that a bit later. So where is Gleam today? That's a bunch of like little data bits, but what does that actually mean when you put it all together? Like if you step back and look at those things, what can we learn? And I think one way to look at it is to look at the path you might take as a Gleamlin. So you start at the very humble beginnings of not really existing, you're not aware of Gleam at all, and then you're at a conference and you see Jack talking about database or something, and he's using this Gleam thing, and you go, ooh, what's that? And you become curious, and your curiosity gets the better of you because you've read all these blog posts that you're putting out that go, oh, maybe I should use Gleam after all, and you become a new user. And then you use the tool, and you get a feel for the language, you get some of that joy that we've all been expressing about how nice it is to use Gleam, and you use some of the wonderful libraries, and you talk to the community, and you realise that, oh wow, this is a place I want to be, I want to use this a lot, my project's going really well. And it becomes a thing you do regular. You become a full-on regular Gleamlin. And after that, there's a few different places you can go that we want you to get to. So you become a production user. You like it so much and you have so much confidence in it that you and your enterprise decide to, actually bet your workload on it. Brilliance. You can become a contributor. That could be contributing to build tool, the compiler, your own libraries, other people's libraries, whatever you fancy. And you become a sponsor. As we said, sponsorship is really important. That's how we keep the wheel turning. So how are we doing with all of these individual steps? We've got a lot of positive feedback from those bits of data, but I think they highlight that we are succeeding mostly at a particular path. I think we're succeeding at these places where the joyous aspect of Gleam really pays dividends. Once you are involved in Gleam, it's very easy for you to get engaged and keep going, have a great time and be very productive making your little projects. And we've got a very easy path for you to become a contributor, whether it be to make a library. There's lots of good opportunities to make libraries, there's lots of good inspiration, whether it be to work on the core build tool, the pilot and stuff like that. We've made the Rust code very approachable. That's fantastic. But that's not every step of this path. We really want to see every single one of those doing as well as possible. And one big bit, going back to money again, is becoming a sponsor. We don't have as many sponsors as we want. What's going on here? Are we not doing this particularly well? Well, I think we are in a way. I think there's sort of like two main paths in becoming a sponsor. One of them is this super happy user path where you are so engaged that you decide to come from different countries to come to Bristol to hang out with your favourite Gleamlins, and you're really engaged. You're the kind of person who might decide you want to support Gleam just because it's important to you and you think it's a worthwhile thing to be part of and to contribute to in that way. Another, and equally valid path that's in no way better or worse, is to look at it as some sort of commercial transaction, or to look at it in a sort of number sort of way. It doesn't make sense for a lot of people and organizations to be giving financial support to Gleam if they are not themselves deriving some kind of quantifiable value from it. So for a lot of people, this will be about being in production and making money. So really, in order to unlock a whole bunch of extra people who would potentially be in a place to sponsor, particularly organizations, which could be very impactful in the long run, we really need to make it easy for people to get into production and have a lot of success in production, which implies we really need to be focusing on this, going from being a regular user to a production user. So we have had a lot of growth there, but why is it that we're not having as much as we would like to in the future? Like, what are some things that hold people back? Could it be that we're lacking confidence in the foundation? No, I don't think so, because the Beam and the various JavaScript engines are extremely well regarded. We're not making a new thing, we don't have to prove it out. If you say you're running on Erlang, you're like, oh wow, that's amazing. That stuff's rock solid. And everybody in the world is running things on V8 and so forth. So I don't think people have concerns from that very core of the whole runtime system. What about lacking confidence in the end results? It doesn't have quite such a direct comparison, but I don't think this is the case either. I think people believe that if you have a system written in Gleam and it's running on one of these well-established powerful runtimes, it's going to be high quality. We've got types, we've got fault tolerance, we've got all these things. People believe that it's going to be a really good thing. And we've got some case studies, thank you very much, which we can evidence to people that it is a good way to go and people are going to have success. And this is going to snowball where the more of this we have, the more it feeds into itself, the more people feel confident with the end results. Brilliant. So what about in the middle of those two things? What about lacking confidence in delivery? You know that the technology, the core, is really reliable, and you know that at the end, once you've made it, it's going to be really good. But I think people don't have as much confidence as we'd like that that path is going to be smooth. That journey is going to be one they're going to be able to traverse in a way that is efficient enough and quick enough to meet their business needs. Because at the moment, if you want to make a big thing in Gleam, you have to make lots of little small things and piece them all together. And for a lot of those things, it's not going to be obvious how you do it. You're going to have to be a pioneer. You're going to be the first person to make an open ID Connect system, first person who makes, what are we using? A QR code generator, who's going to have to generate bitmap images. These are all things which are doable, but you need to make little decisions about how you're going to do it. Or even simple things like, how am I going to do data persistence? How am I going to do validation? We haven't had all of these conventions and patterns rise up out of the ecosystem in some way. So you have to make a decision. And if you are not sure, what do you do? Well, you just sort of have to go on the Discord. You have to go on the Discord and hope someone is going to spring forth and give you an answer, which they are, because it's a wonderful, friendly, welcoming community. But that's still a lot more of a cognitive overhead, and it still takes a lot more time than you just going, oh, how do I do it? Well, I know how to do it, because in Ruby on Rails we do this, I'm doing this. I don't even have to think about it, we just move on. You have to resolve all of these little problems every single time, which is great for certain people, but for a lot of people, it just isn't going to be viable in the same way. And I think this is the big problem. And if you look at the responses in the developer survey, where people are saying, what is the most, what would be the suggested improvements? What do people want the most, that they think is going to help us the most? That's the main theme. People are saying they want to know what the patterns are, they want examples, they want a book, they need a guide and docs. People are saying they're really happy with Gleam, they really want to make things with Gleam, but they just need a little bit of help knowing how to do things. So to me this says, what we really need is really comprehensive, how-to practical information. Material that shows you how to solve these little problems to make slightly larger building blocks than we have right now, so you can piece them together to solve whatever your business problem is. You can go and pioneer if you want to, but that should be something you're doing because you think you can do better, or it's interesting, or that's how you choose to work. It shouldn't be the only path. And so this is really going to be directing where I personally am going to be focusing on working for the foreseeable future. So there's a whole bunch of things I'd like to do. So one of them is, I would like to introduce a bunch of Gleam guides and tutorials that do just this. Some official, searchable guides for all of the common little things that people are butting up against. And showing people how to do it in a way where they can pretty much just copy these patterns, but it also educates you and informs you what the patterns are, and then designed in such a way that they can interrupt with the little patterns we're common with today, but also the patterns that are exposed by all of the other guides to make them very much like puzzle pieces. And we like static analysis and verification and stuff, so we want to have it type checked and tested and always up to date. Because a big problem in other ecosystems, and already to some extent in ours today, is it's very easy to find tutorials and reference material that has rotted away, has become out of date, and if you follow it, you get halfway through and you go, oh, this doesn't compile anymore, or oh no, this pattern isn't compatible with what we expect in the rest of the world. We've done a little bit of mock-up already. So here's maybe what we might deliver soon. We've had tags and such and all sort of stuff. So Isaac's working on that. Another thing we're going to want to have is something to get you from zero to getting started. That previous bit solves the problem of I've got something already and I want to add X, I want to add Y. How do I do it? Okay, well I reference it. when you start a new project, there's a certain amount of, I have a brand new empty project, and it is, for example, a server-side rendering web app with some forms that talks to a Postgres database. There's a bunch of things there that pretty much every one of these applications is going to look exactly the same, or at least it's going to solve exactly the same problems. But you now need to spend the first, week, 2 weeks or something, just piecing all those things together and hoping you don't make a mistake, and then redoing it. Well, if you look in the Elixir community with Phoenix, or Ruby on Rails, or lots and lots of other places, JavaScript with Create, React app and things, you don't need to make those decisions. You don't suffer from a death by 1,000 paper cuts before you can even start writing your first line of code. That is yours, rather than boilerplates. So we want to take that all away from you. I don't know if this is the API for it. The important stuff is going to be the content rather than how it is we serve that to you. But we want to be able to solve that problem for all of the common patterns that the common problems we see people solving. And yes, I suppose we should probably have one of these as well. Yes. I actually told myself I was going to do this last year and I failed. So hopefully, at some point in the future, we should also have a book. I think that would be really important. I'm not going to promise that's going to be the first on my list, but I really do want to achieve that. Does that mean it's the end of improving the joy of Gleam? Are we going to switch entirely to the other stream? No, not at all. This is what I want to be focusing on, and I'm still going to be enabling all the other stuff to happen, but it's up for you folks in the community and also the other members of the core team to keep improving the things that you think is important to you. And I think largely people want to work on making Gleam lovely for them to use. So we do have a few things planned already, which I've picked some things at the roadmap that I think is particularly exciting. I mentioned earlier the FFA safeguards in development. I think that's going to be really good. We have identified that a really common way for you to trip up when you start to use FFI, or not when you start, but when you are using FFI, is just to have a misalignment between what you've said the function does and what the computer says the function does. So we can add some safeguards to make sure that if you pass in the wrong thing, it explodes immediately rather than it exploding 2 months later when it's in production and you've ruined your day because it's woken you up at 2 in the morning. We've got a whole bunch of hex security improvements which we've been working with the Erlang Ecosystem Foundation in order to make things more secure and get us ready for a lot of the new legislations coming out in the EU, and probably also going to follow through into the UK and USA and all that sort of stuff. So you shouldn't have to worry about it, but I am going to start making you do multi-factor authentication soon. I'm very sorry. We've had command line application tooling mentioned a few times already today, so cool. I feel like I was correct that this is something that is bothering people. We've got some tooling for it already. Erlang eScripts are not as bad as people think they are. I think we just need to make them easy to use. If we have some better story around that, that will pay dividends already. I think for a lot of use cases, it's not unreasonable to expect there to be an Erlang installed on the computer, particularly for the use cases where you're making tools for developers, you're making tools for Gleamers. They probably do have the VM, that will help in that case, and there's some community projects to try and help with the other cases as well, so that's somewhere we can improve. Dependencies are really important. They make things easier, but they also give you a huge headache when they go wrong. So we're going to continue to improve the tooling around that. I think Gleam is unusual. I think Elm is maybe the only other one that I can think of where we actually do Semver. I feel most people just ignore Semver and they just sort of go, well, if I do major, never, I do minor when I think about it, and everything else is a bug, right? That's kind of what Semver means in practice, but we are actually doing a really good job of saying, no, this is a breaking change. I'm actually going to increment the major number, and that stops people from getting unexpected build failures. That's really good, but it does introduce this pain of now you're managing your dependencies is a bit trickier, because you do actually need to face into the fact that there is a breaking change, rather than just pretend it's not there. So we can do things to automatically try and resolve those problems. That's going to be something we continue to improve and continue to explore. OTP, keep mentioning OTP. OTP is hard to use, hard to get started using. One of the things you should always be doing when you're making an OTP application is to use the OTP application interface. And I'm so confident that none of you are. I'm so confident that none of you are, because I'm not using it and my documentation shows how not to use it as well. That's terrible. That's my fault. I need to fix that. And part of that is that the We've got really nice APIs for doing typed message systems with actors and so forth. We don't have an equivalent for application. So we need to find an abstraction for that. Got some good ideas. I think once that lands, it should be so easy to use applications that you don't even think about it. It's just a thing that's there. And that can also be incorporated into those template generators we were mentioning earlier. And this one is pretty much just for Haley, I think. Improvements to the multi-target package system. So at the moment, you can write your package to work on Erlang and bits of it on JavaScript, or on JavaScript and bits of it on Erlang. It's really hard to have bits of it work on Erlang and bits of it work on JavaScript. You have to commit crimes. It's also really hard to have it so that you can do really micro optimizations. Maybe you've got like a really important fast performance loop, say a virtual DOM diffing engine in some sort of web framework, for example. You may need to do things that are slightly different on the different runtimes. And there just isn't really good ways to do that today. So we want to solve all those problems so you can have these really nice cross-platform libraries that are fast and good and don't have these huge headaches they're dealing with all the time. So lots and lots of things still to improve, and I'm really hoping we can get more people down that path of being a Gleam and being in production and being happy and being full of joy in the future. Thank you very much. Any questions?
There's some questions. All right, we're going to start this side.
Mine's very quick and easy for you. What does OTP stand for?
It doesn't matter. It's a rubbish name. It stands for Open Telecom Platform, and it was picked in the 80s by the team who were making it because it was 3 buzzwords that Ericsson liked internally. So they thought if they picked 3 buzzwords, they would be more likely to get it released to the public, and they succeeded. But it is a rubbish name that has nothing to do with what it is.
So what is it?
It is an application framework. It is a concurrency framework and a way of structuring applications that give you a bunch of really nice properties that you would otherwise have to solve. So, for example, how do I make it so my program is capable of tolerating errors when they happen? How do I run workloads across multiple cores? How do I do monitoring? How do I do observing? It's a bunch of building blocks you use to put together reliable, fault-tolerant programs. It's super unclear. We do need to document it more.
Hi. As somebody that's kind of privacy conscious with putting my personal payment information in places like GitHub, which is owned by Microsoft,
Yes.
can I just give you 10 euros?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, we do have another payment system. Oh wow, it's actually happening. I'm going to do more talks this year. Thank you. Gosh, I'm so glad they got derailed. There is another payment system on the sponsors page on the website. There is Liberia. No, that's a country. Which you can go that way as well. It hasn't had huge amounts of uptake. There's been some people say, oh, can you start using X? Because then people might sponsor. My learning of trying that in the past is that people don't actually use it. People just like the idea of you saying it over things. One of the reasons why those 2 platforms are really nice is that they swallow GitHub swallows all of the fees, unless you're a company, and then they don't swallow the actual transaction fee for the card. Liberia Pay swallows everything except the transaction fee. Most other platforms take huge cuts, which I find kind of horrid, really. Patreon is one people ask me for, and I think they take like 30% or something just to run a world's worst web page, as far as I can tell. If you are a company and want to do wires and stuff, like I can invoice you, but I suspect you're not.
Hi, especially for companies, what about an IBAN number, a normal bank account?
Yes,
That we can just make transactions in?
yeah, I'm doing that with Lambda, for example. Should you just put the details on the I don't know how it works. Maybe it's just something we should look at. I think there might be some financial and accounting implications for just money going into my account. I kind of need to
Yeah,
have a
you
vague
should use your own, you shouldn't use.
No, yes. So like I've got a limited company which has a whole bunch of bank accounts.
Yeah.
If I was going to make something public, I think I'd need to do some admin to like make a dedicated sponsorship account so I can actually identify that that's what this is coming from. Otherwise, it's very difficult to understand what the paper chain is. There's also a bunch of tax implications depending on what jurisdiction you're from. It gets very complicated very fast. So where we're at the moment is a nice balance between people being able to pay money and it not having huge amounts of work on us.
It is just, as a company, it's much easier to just use a bank account.
Oh, yes.
And you don't put it on your company card.
If you want to approach as a company, you don't want to go via GitHub, we can definitely arrange something, but it's just not something that's publicly available at the moment. A thing that we've done a little bit of initial investigation work and might happen, and I think is not very relevant to the majority of this room, is to set up whatever a charity is called in America, to have like a Gleam Foundation, because there's, if you look at the breakdown of where people are in the Gleam world, the largest cohort is in the United States of America, very, very big place, and they've got a lot of money sloshing around in the tech world. There's some indication that some people would be interested in sponsoring via the company, provided it can be tax deductible. So if we can jump through a certain amount of hoops, that could be a way we can get some more money to the thing, but it's always difficult to know if we're going to do all of this work and then it's not going to pay off. So it's sort of.
Has there been discussions regarding other ways of financing the Gleam team, the development of Gleam? Outside of sponsorships, maybe.
Yeah, it's really tricky because I think that when you are trying to do something that is financially viable, you need to lean into whatever your unique strength is. And whenever I see other similar projects try and do something to raise money, I often think they either miss what their unique strength is, or they end up spending so much time on it then it takes away from their ability to actually do the thing that the thing is for. So 2 examples could be, it can be, I've seen it approached to try and make a SaaS business that has something to do with, something to do with the language. Well, that's sort of predicated the idea that we have enough users and enough production users for them to generate business for the SaaS. Okay, I'm not sure we're there yet, I could be wrong, but then you need to run a SaaS business. SaaS business is actually quite hard to run. I've tried to start my up a few times and I've not really succeeded. I don't really have any reason to believe that I'm going to do better at making a Gleam hosting platform than any of the existing hosts are. So like that's kind of tricky. Another way is consulting. I've seen a bunch of other languages do a thing where they offer consulting services. That's very difficult because it scales really badly. You need to put a lot of hours into the thing in order to be able to make money from it. There's no point having money if you then don't have any person hours left in order to spend the money with. We would just become the people who look after Gleam nominally, but we mostly just ignore it, and we spend most of our time doing Erlang consulting or something like that. So it's tricky. That said, I have not thought of all of the ideas, so if anyone has anything, I'd really love to hear.
So I made a few notes. I'll try to be short. Did you consider? I'm also aware of the dangers possibly of having rapid growth, doing like what we did too early, but doing now like crowdfunding Kickstarter and maybe packaging a few things that are to get more sponsors like at once, but then also over time because there's more publicity.
Yeah, so I think it was the Laravel folks did a really interesting thing where they said once we have a certain number of sponsors, we will release a new toolkit for everyone to use for free. That's kind of interesting. I feel quite conflicted about it. I'm very much like a hardcore open sourcey person, always have been. The idea of doing something privately and then release it, after some point feels not in keeping with the spirit of the thing to me, but perhaps that me being naive, I don't know. The other side of it is there are tax implications of it. That would mean that my sponsorship then becomes a transaction rather than being a donation, and then I need to process a lot more tax paperwork for that. It's like, okay, that's a gamble of, if we do that and we don't make enough money, I still have to do the tax work, possibly forever. So it's like I don't know if that's a gamble. I don't know if it's the right thing to do.
But even if you set it up and you set it up at some threshold where it definitely pays off, let's say 100K or something. Let's just imagine, and then it doesn't fulfill it doesn't reach the minimum. Then you still have the publicity going, and then potentially sponsors. However, there will be other implications. I understand.
It might be that. So, for example, I talked about having a Gleam Foundation, which, because it's here in the States, would be financially independent from the limited company of music at the moment. That could be a potential vessel for that. Maybe they're already doing a bunch of admin. It could be that the overhead for them is lower. So it's something to explore. But again, it takes a lot of time and a lot of confidence to start a big project like that. Also, we have to deliver the thing. So we need to find a good thing that everybody wants to deliver.
Like a VM. Or
Yeah, native backend.
REPL.
Yeah, types, not types, macros. Yeah, exactly.
Hello,
Hey.
great to meet you in person. I wanted to talk about money, but I want to talk a bit more about something more technical. So basically, something that I'm kind of interested in, I wanted to know your thoughts on. So you talked a bit about the evolution of the Gleam community and the Gleam project in general. And there's one aspect I would like to highlight as part of the maybe growth of the project that I would like to know what you think about, which is basically that over the first few years of, let's say, Q1, there were multiple projects that implemented, let's say, a new targets for Gleam. You can suspect because I made one of them that compiles to Nix. Yeah. And so I'd like to know, what do you think this represents for the future of Gleam as a community, as a, let's say, group of enthusiasts of Gleam? Like, how do you think should it affect the future and how the core team makes the decisions and kind of stuff?
I don't know. It's strange, isn't it? Why do people come to a functional language and then just suddenly decide to become a compiler developer? There is something there, isn't there? There's a lot of similar languages that have the same thing. Like Elm, I think the joke is now that the majority of the users are maintaining their own Elm compiler. So I don't know. It's tricky. We have to think a lot about. So Gleam is not a project for doing research or blah 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 blah. It's a thing for getting things done, for being in production, for making stuff. So we always need to think about things in terms of the cost of the maintenance, sustainability of the project. And every big jump in complexity we add to the things that we maintain increases the workload. So if you're going to say, oh, we could just stop, I could not write all those documentation and guides and things, and I could work on Gleam Native or the Gleam VM. That would be really fun and exciting, and I think everyone would really enjoy talking about it. But I'm not sure that would actually involve us making things better for us as the Gleam community, really. Might be fun, but that's not quite where we're aiming. So it's sort of bittersweet for me, really. I would love to play more of that stuff.
Thank you.
Cool. I've seen quite a lot of hands, but I'm gonna try and make sure we go time to lunch. Obviously, go and talk to Louis. This is the whole point. So we are now coming up to your biggest opportunity to talk to Louis. But yeah, one more round of applause.